About this, talk a little bit about the spring planted small cereal grains. And whoa, excuse me. That was quick there. The three cereal grains that fit into that category are of course, oats, spring triticale, and spring barley. Now, I do have listed here some field peas, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, there's a few other legumes that could be used with these cool season annuals cereal grains planted in the spring. Now, there are a number of different varieties of these different cereal grains that you hear about. And generally, they fall into the categories of whether they're forage types, grain types, or dual purpose. So most of them are dual purpose, but in the case of the forage types and some of these dual purpose, they're typically selected to be taller. They're later maturing. They are generally more leafy and have wider leaves. And of course, the seed may be more expensive for some of those. Now, in the case of oats, for example, some specific forage varieties of oats are like Everleaf 126 and the CDC Haymaker. Then there are strictly some grain type of oats, and a couple examples here, Rockford and Camden. And then dual purpose varieties, so either grain or forage, would be Goliath, Hayden, or Jerry. So that's just a few examples of some of the different types in the case of oats. And similar for barley or spring triticale, you'll find some different variety names with those. So with the cool season annual cereal grains, we're looking at planting dates from mid-March to mid-April. They do like or can tolerate the cool soil temperatures. I guess, though, if we may be more in northwestern Nebraska, you could go a bit more later into April and still be okay. If you are too late on that planting date, though, that is going to hurt your yield. Seeding rates, I'll talk more about this. We did do a seeding rate study with oats. And as far as fertility, again, for the phosphorus and potassium, you really need to do a soil test. But for the nitrogen, we do know for certain that most cases, anywhere from 40 to 70 pounds of nitrogen would be required for a spring forage crop of one of these cereal grains. I mentioned the seeding rate as a possibility, and that, of course, varies. We did do a study here with a variety of oats called Goliath. And when it comes to oats, I have there on the bottom left corner that oats, as far as a bushel weight of oats, can range anywhere from 32 to 38 pounds. It depends on the grade of that oat. But in our study, we did this at HPAL, which is a High Plains Ag Lab at Sydney here in North Platte. Lincoln, Darren worked on the site. But we had seeding rates of oats of just 25 pounds per acre. So that would be just slightly less than a bushel per acre, either 50 pounds per acre, 75, or 100 pounds per acre. And what was interesting, and I'll just look on the right side of that bar chart, the mean for the three locations, we saw that whether you were at 50, 75, or 100 pounds per acre of this oats, there was no difference in forage yield of that. Now, those three rates were higher than the 25 pounds per acre. So that was a bit surprising in terms of what we were seeing there. And just a photo here of some of the plots and what that thing looked like. On the left would be a 25 pound per acre oat seeding rate that had no nitrogen, because we did have nitrogen fertility rates combined on there. And then on the right side is 100 pound per acre, or actually, so that'd be about 3 bushels per acre on the right side. And you can see obviously the difference in the density of the stands there. But you know what, it appears at the lighter rates, those plants tend to grow a little bit bigger. They're not competing as much for the nutrients in the soil, and so their yield at those lighter rates can be pretty good as well. In addition to that seeding rate study, we did our combined treatments of different nitrogen fertility rates. We had 30 or 30 is 60 pounds of nitrogen applied per acre. And again, just looking at the means, we did see a nice linear response where at the no nitrogen fertilizer, we were at just a little over 300 pounds or 3,000 pounds per acre production. At 30 pounds of N, we were just at 4,200. And then at the highest rate of 60 pounds of N, we had yields of about 4,400 pounds per acre. Just a summary on that seeding rate and nitrogen rate. One of the things we did see with those lower seeding rates is that the stem diameter of the plants was bigger, which you would expect as the little less competition in there. And then also, I mentioned this earlier, that the height of those plants at the lower seeding rate was also taller. And then another item that was kind of interesting, that the crude protein content at those lower seeding rates was higher. And that's probably a response to the fact that, again, with fewer seeds out there, there just wasn't as many plants competing for those nutrients in the soil. Just a few other things in some of the trials that we've done here in North Platte. Here's a photo of some plots where we planted them on March 31st, and just wanted to show you some yields of the different things. Now, these yields are quite exceptional, and they're probably some of the best I ever had. And so that brings up a point where what I've seen over the years, that every year is different in terms of what you can expect or see from some of these different forages. And I think that goes for anything, whether it's a summer annual or something you planted in late summer for fall forage. Just the temperature, weather conditions can really make a difference in what type of yields that you do see. And this particular year, like I say, 2015, we had some just super tremendous spring yields with these. So anyway, we had, let's see, 8 different entries here. We had a couple of, we had an Everleaf 126 oats, a haybed barley, 2 different spring triticales, and then 4 other oat varieties. Planted on March 31st, harvested on June 22nd, and we go for, in these case of these plot trials, simulate hay harvest. Now, the Everleaf oats was harvested later. And one of the things I pointed out at the bottom of the table here, we do shoot for harvest them at an generally equal stage of maturity, and really looking for a late milk to soft dough stage. And so in most cases, I would really say that we were in late milk and never really to the point of forming a soft dough. But again, you can see with those forages there, some excellent yields and some pretty good growth on them. And this is just a side by side of a couple of those different forages in the plots. On the left there being a haybed barley, and on the right, triticale. One of the things about this I just wanted to mention is that don't let height fool you. So in this case here, that barley on the left was shorter than the triticale, but the yield was actually very close or similar, I believe. I'll just jump back up. Right, yeah. Similar yield, but a little bit difference in height. Just the barley being much more finer stemmed and a lot more tillers in there. So it's a much denser, shorter growing forage. And on the right here, some spring triticale on the left and Goliath oats on the right. And you can see this is just a few days before we harvested. So these forages are headed out. And again, that stage of maturity as we go in there, and if you were to pinch on some of those kernels on those seed heads there, you would see a liquid coming out. And if we see it's actually white, of course, that would be defined as a milk stage rather than just a clear liquid. Some of the quality results from those at that date, harvest date, anywhere from almost 8% on the Everleaf oats up to 12% crude protein content on the Goliath oats that we had in there. little bit about some mixtures with peas, which is a practice that can be done. And we did do a trial with that earlier on in 2017 and 18. And this just represents the yield. So what we did on the left, the first treatment was just straight oats, or 70 pounds of oats per acre. Then we did 100% peas, or 70 pounds of peas per acre. That's the second bar yield there. And then we had mixtures. One was 17.5 pounds of oats and 52 pounds of peas. Another one was 50-50, 35 oats, 35 peas. And then the 52 oats and 17.5 pounds of peas per acre seeded. And I should have the significance letters on there, but first of all, on the left, the 70 oats and the 70 peas side by side, the oat yield from the oats alone was significantly greater than the peas. And then at the other interesting one to look at is that 50% oats and 50% peas, or 35-35, that the oats still did provide a greater proportion of the yield for that. But the idea with this, of course, mixing oats and peas, is the nitrogen fixation benefit of the peas, but also its effect on forage quality. And so this would be the crude protein content. And again, I should have had the significance letters, but oats alone, the 70 pounds of oats came in at about 9% crude protein. The peas alone at 70 pounds were at 19%, so a significantly greater crude protein content with the peas in there. And that effect carried throughout, even at the rate of just 17.5 pounds of peas per acre. That did significantly increase the crude protein content of that oat and pea mixture. One other thing I just wanted to mention about these traditional spring grain forages is that they can be planted late summer, and Mary addressed this a little bit in some of her other talks that she presented earlier in this series. But here in North Platte, we did some of these types of things where we planted a number of these in August 13th was the date on this particular year, and harvested them on October 29th, so late October. And in that case of this trial here, we had a spring triticale, oats, barley. We had a hard red spring wheat, and then another variety called stallion oats, and then just winter wheat. But again, in that fall, late October yield of over 4 tons, around 4 tons per acre was pretty impressive with that August 13th planting date. Now, these, I should mention this was under irrigation. Another thing we did here, again, this is using some of these cool season annuals, but we planted mixtures of winter hardy and non-winter hardy species. And we would plant these again in August. So in the case here, rye and oats would be probably one of the more common ones. Well, you could do things like the winter triticale and a spring triticale, a winter triticale and oats. And the idea here is, in this fall period, we were trying to produce more forage, but then yet the non-winter hardy species would kill out, of course, or freeze out over the winter, but the winter hardy species would remain over winter and be there in the spring for growth again. So really trying to get a spring, or I should say a fall and a spring forage with one planting operation, rather than doing it twice with your fall seeding as well as the spring seeding. And as it worked out, yes, this does work. Say in the case of if I don't have it here, the rye and oats, the oats produced quite well in the fall. Then we were at half rate of each of these, of course, so it does show, and I think the competition, that you see in the fall from the oats on the rye did hurt the rye a little bit for the following spring, because it produced fairly well in the spring, but the rye yield in the spring was just not like it would typically be from a fully planted stand of rye alone. And one last thing, and this might seem like a crazy question, but I've had this question asked of me: can you plant winter rye or winter wheat in the spring? And I think in most cases, their situation was they had all this rye seed and they wanted to get rid of it. So, but we did do a trial with that, and what we found is that on that photo there, the rye plot is on the right side. And what happened, we planted this again on March 29th, and you can see that some of that rye did vernalize, and we had about 50% of it go ahead and head out. The wheat, which is from the second to the right there, did not do anything whatsoever, really. It grew vegetatively, only produced a little over a ton per acre. And then the third from the right on that picture is oats, and that oats produced a little over three tons per acre. So that was just a little bit of an interesting thing that we did try, because it was just a question that came up to me. And so with that, I want to open it up for any questions that you might have, whether in the chat or just unmute yourself and free feel to ask those questions.
Thank you, Jerry. In terms of grazing, do you have any advice for management of the spring small cereals?
Sure. Yes, and I think a lot of the general principles and concepts are the same for which you talked about, like with spring grazing of rye or triticale. You don't want to let them get too far ahead of you. So with something like oats, for example, or the spring triticale, here at North Platte, we see with that late March planting date, it's usually about the third week of May where they're make it to that 6 inches. And that's when we definitely recommend that you should start grazing those, because it seems after that they can go from being just 5 or 6 inches tall to 10 inches tall in less than a week's time. And so you do want to be on top of them with the grazing early. Then also, just the other general animal management side of things too, the high mag mineral, because these again are lush green forages in the spring.
All right, thank you. Feel free to type in the chat or the questions, or again, you can unmute if you have questions. So James asked, would you do the oats and rye together again? So I think he's
Yes.
like, if you were to think about advantages and disadvantages,
Yes.
consider it?
Yes, I would. The nice thing about that, again, like I said, is that just a one-time seeding operation. And with that, and it was 50% rate of each. So rye and oats, and the oats really does quite well in the fall against with a little bit of rye competition in there. And of course, you're getting some grazing forage out of the rye. But the thing we did see was that we harvested off these plots too. But the thing we did see that the rye in the spring was not as productive as we thought it might be, even at that 50% seeding rate. But again, it kind of maybe boils down to economics again, just the cost of or the benefit of having only one trip across the field with that tractor and drill.
So if I remember correctly about that, did you also see a bit of a yield drag in the fall? Because I felt like it was like on average, you actually got about the same amount of forage as a monoculture.
Right. Yeah. So
it just changed the distribution.
Exactly is really what it does. So yeah, in the fall, thinking about the oats that you want to do really well, of course, in the fall, you've got the yield growing, the rye growing and providing a little bit of a yield drag on it at that time of year. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, it's kind of like if I really need fall forage, I'm probably going to do oats only. If I really need spring, I'm going to do rye only. if, for instance, I am kind of looking for both, then as you said, the advantage of mixing them is just that I have one pass. So there's some, I think you're not really gaining more total forage. It's just where the distribution of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some person really needs that, they might just do 2 different fields.
Yeah. And of course, again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But yes, because then you can get into the field that you had oats in earlier in the spring, and you can delay getting into the one that you have rye in. So there's the fun thing about the annual forages, and sometimes the frustrating thing about the annual forages, is there's endless possibilities.
And again, like I mentioned earlier on, when it comes to how they do each year, that it's, you can see really big differences between years just because of the whatever the temperature, the rainfall pattern, those types of things.